This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I ask everyone to make sure your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions? And can I now ask our clerk, Paul Goodchild, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence this morning from Assemblymember Clark, and Assemblymember Baker is here as substitute, and from Assemblymember Russell, and Assemblymember Berry is here as substitute.
Okay, morning everyone. So, quick bit of housekeeping. Item 2, declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask members if they have any other interests to declare? Noted. Excellent. And item 3, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of October 2023 to be signed by me as a correct record?
Agreed.
Excellent. And 4, summary list of actions. Can I ask the committee to note the completed and ongoing actions from previous meetings of the committee?
Agreed.
Excellent. So that takes us to item 5, which is our main item this morning. A discussion focusing on the Greater London Authority 24-25 budget for housing. So if I could welcome our large and excellent panel of guests this morning. We have Tom Copley, who is the Deputy Mayor for Housing and Residential Development. Lynn Garner, who's the Chief Executive of LLDC. We have Gerry Murphy, who's the Executive Director of Financial, Commercial and Corporate Services at LLDC. We have David Lunts, who's the Chief Executive Officer at OPDC. We have Emma Williamson, who's the Director of Planning at OPDC. We have Gurdip Juti, I apologise if I have not pronounced your name correctly, Chief Finance Officer of OPDC. Tim Steer, who's the Executive Director of Housing for the GLA. Heather Dewman, who's the Assistant Director of Housing at the GLA. Simon Powell, who's the Assistant Director of Strategic Projects and Property at the GLA. And last but not least, Graham Craig, the Director and Chief Executive at TTL Properties Limited. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Budget and Performance Committee. I'd just thank everyone for coming in this morning. We have no remote guests, so everyone who is here with us. So if I can kick off with the first question, which is a sort of starter for 10, I'll start with you, Tom. What are the challenges and opportunities that you anticipate in the delivery of the housing targets for 2024 and 2025?
Thank you very much, Chair. It feels, I don't know about you, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day for me, having been in front of you less than a week ago to answer a very similar opening question. But I'm sure as we get into the weeds of things, new issues will come out. So, turning to your question on the delivery challenges, which I think I've sort of set out on a number of occasions to the Assembly. As I said last week, it feels like every single light on the dashboard is flashing red at the same time. So when I started this role, which in March will be 4 years, which is an odd thing to think, I started the week we went into lockdown, the first lockdown for the pandemic. What a start that was. And the pandemic at that point seemed like an unprecedented challenge for the sector. And that was a sector, of course, that had already been grappling with the challenges of Brexit, the building safety crisis, the challenge of retrofit, planning departments being hollowed out by years of austerity, and a labour shortage. And, you know, the pandemic seemed like, you know, the sort of latest thing to hit delivery in the sector. But, of course, then came the war in Ukraine. Then came rising materials and financing costs as a result of the Liz Truss mini-budget. And now, of course, we're seeing contractor insolvency and regulatory uncertainty regarding second staircases. And that final one, really, at the moment, is probably the biggest challenge facing the sector. There are currently 34,000 homes in limbo in the planning system. And that's, by the way, just homes that we're aware of at the GLA, i.e. homes that meet the threshold to be referred to the Mayor. There'll be many thousands of others, I've no doubt, that we have no idea about because they are on non-referable schemes. So really it's been a perfect storm, and I talk to people who've been working in the sector for decades, certainly far longer than I've been involved in anyway in housing, and they say it's the worst that they've ever known, worse even than in the last financial crash. But in the face of these challenges, of course, we have started record numbers of affordable homes, hitting the 116,000 target set for the Mayor by the government. Ministers missed theirs, I should add, and we continue to support the sector through these very challenging times to bring forward new starts and, of course, to see homes through to completions, which is, of course, absolutely crucial. We've also used our unique strategic position at City Hall to bring the sector together on several occasions to help face these challenges, and this was done through the Housing Delivery Recovery Task Force, which I chair. Our latest position statement that made recommendations, around 25 recommendations, both to the government and to the Mayor, was signed by 27 organisations from across the sector. And these organisations range from big developers, housing associations, councils, right across the entire sector. And in terms of the involvement in the process itself, trade unions and community organisations too. So, we've been using our position to try and to bring the sector together and face these challenges. We've also been making progress internally, implementing the recommendations from the late Lord Kerslake's review of GLA Group housing delivery, and I'm sure the committee will have questions on that. But amidst all of this, funding remains really tight, and funding is a massive challenge. I know it might seem to people like we have a lot of money available for affordable housing. But to put the funding we've got for affordable housing into context, the Affordable Homes Programme that we're currently administering averages around...
Sorry, Tom, I don't really like to interrupt, but it's just that we have got 10 guests. And the question was, what are the challenges, rather than how brilliant is the mayor, and list every single thing he's done.
In that case, I'll bring in the how brilliant is the mayor later in the
I have no doubt about that. Just,
quite right to cut me off.
Yes. As you say, there is an echo of Thursday. Sticking with the question, which you may have forgotten, which was about what are the challenges and opportunities of delivering the targets. Perhaps, Lynn, from a sort of LLDC point of view, what are the challenges and opportunities for delivering your housing plans?
Just sticking with the housing for the time being.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, similarly to the context that Tom has set out, obviously, the whole sector's grappling with this regulatory environment at the minute, which is causing us great difficulties. We've seen it reported in the press and so on and so forth. And that's against the backdrop of the rising inflation over the last 18 months or so, rising construction costs, although they appear to have plateaued at the moment, and a similar plateauing of house values. So one of the reassessments in our budget this year includes a reassessment of this year's forward look and the next 5 years HPI and TPI house and construction inflation, both of which are going in the wrong direction and have meant a huge adjustment to our capital budgets, which we may or may not get into the detail of later, and Gerry can talk to. So that is having a huge impact on LLDC's budget at the moment and its capital borrowing and so on. We have actually had a reasonable year in terms of starts. We've had about 400 starts on the park, mostly across 2 sites, one of them being Hackney Wick, where we have a 100% affordable housing site, small site, but nevertheless sort of at least in the ground and so on. And at Eastwick, the second phase of Eastwick has also started on site, which is all good news. They both had spades in the ground just before the worst of the current crisis. They're both able to carry on, even in this current regulatory environment, which is good, and there's been some transitional guidance, really. But I guess I'd say they were the key challenges on the housing side.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, obviously we're only interested in the housing side. I know LLDC has other stuff, but this morning is housing is our sole focus.
That's fine.
So, David, from the OPDC point of view, sorry, I'm scanning around trying to read the little signs all the way over here. Yes, David, from the OPDC point of view, what are the challenges for your housing? Obviously, you're in a slightly different position, but for the, let's say, the coming year or two, what are your big challenges?
Well, I mean, I won't repeat what Lynn and Tom have already mentioned, except to say that I very much...
Oh, sorry, yes, don't forget to switch
Sorry.
There we
Are we
go.
all right?
Yes.
We're on. Good.
We are go.
Well, I was about to say I won't repeat, and I'm just about to repeat, actually. Very much agree with Tom and Lynn. Very similar situation in terms of the challenges around second staircases and the need to redesign schemes that were already, in some cases, well through the beginning of the planning process. Viability remains a challenge right across London, and OPDC's area is no exception. So it's definitely been quite a tough year. I think, as you rightly say, Chair, I mean, we're in a rather different sort of stage of our evolution. So we're still very much in the preparation stage as opposed to the sort of hardcore delivery stage. And I think that has actually meant that there are some opportunities that we've been able to grasp. So, we've gone big this year on site assembly, site acquisition. we've gone big on preparing our infrastructure plans. And I think, one of the lessons perhaps, not just of the present crisis around housing viability and delivery, but also stretching back over many downturns and previous cycles, is that if you really want to insulate as best one can the challenges that come with downturns, then gaining control over land and being in a position where you can operate in a counter-cyclical way, both through delivering more affordable housing but also using public sector land, is really important. And that's one of the reasons why over the last 6 to 12 months we've been very busy preparing our plans to get a consolidated and comprehensive approach to the public land assets at Old Oak, which we're confident will leave us in a much stronger position as we get into mainstream delivery over the next 2 to 3 years.
So in terms of sort of spades in the ground, obviously you've got land assembly and then planning and then construction. I don't want to hold you to it, firmly, but just as a sort of rough finger in the air guesstimate, what does a timeline look like?
We are getting on with delivery of early sites as we speak. So OPDC's already seen around 4,000 homes completed. There's 8,000 homes in the planning pipeline. But as I say, recently they have been challenged because of the new regulatory regime. So you won't be surprised to hear that in the OPDC area, we get very few small applications for residential development and a few very large ones. And those very large ones have all been subject to redesign. I'm happy to say that one for around 450 residential homes was approved, I think, just earlier this week by the Mayor at stage 2. We've also got another very large application which OPDC has approved in North Acton for well over 1,000 homes. So I'm pretty confident that we've got a pipeline, but the really major development at what we call Old Oak West, which are the big public sector sites around the new High-Speed 2 Old Oak Common Station, we're still in the process of assembling that land, and we anticipate being in a position to go to the market to find investment and development partners for that big opportunity over the course of the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Graham, TTL Properties, what does the next year or two look like? What are the challenges and how are you gloriously overcoming them?
I probably should begin by announcing that we're now called Places for London. So our name was changed. TTL Properties was the name of the company that was set up in 2014 to hold our shareholding in Earls Court. It was never intended to be a public or market-facing name. We became financially independent of TfL in April last year. So for 18 months, we directly have taken no funding from TfL, from ratepayers, from taxpayers. We're solely commercially funded. That means that, yes, whilst the largest impact for us is awaiting the further guidance on the safety relating to second staircases, we are exposed to construction cost inflation, swap rates and interest rates staying higher for longer, yield expansion. We're also, in particular for us over the next 2 years, we have 4,295 homes completed or under construction, but really it's the next 12 months where we'll be putting in planning applications for our 2 largest sites at Edgware and Earls Court, and together they comprise 7,500 homes. So managing those 2 sites through the planning process, and indeed other large sites to follow, including Limo at Canning Town, that really will be the focus for us, alongside obviously completing construction on those sites that we have started.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That was a sort of opening gambit. Oh, Tim, sorry, I've overlooked you, Tim. I do apologise before I moved on.
I thought I might just add a couple of specifics from the GLA's perspective,
Please
if that's
do.
okay. Thank you. So, a couple of key areas for next year around the Affordable Homes Programme and development on GLA-owned sites. Clearly, for the 21 to 26 Affordable Homes Programme, next year is a key delivery year. It's the penultimate year. But we understand all the challenges which partners are facing, similar to those which have been set out already. The way I think about it is that we got into a really good place at the end of the last financial year, at the end of the previous programme. The team was really focused on really working hard with partners to make opportunities work, being creative and flexible to take opportunities, and I think that's the kind of mindset we need to be in over the whole of the next 2 years. Really, you know, it's difficult. It's a difficult moment, and kind of time on this programme's running out. So that's what we're looking to achieve there. But equally, at the same time, we also need to remember that the 16 to 23 programme isn't over, and the team works incredibly hard with partners to ensure that the completions on that programme are coming through as expected. And so we need to keep that dual focus. And then on the other side, so that's Heather's area really, and on the other side of things is Simon's area, which is development on GLA-owned sites through GLAP. GLAP's got a really good record of delivery over the past few years, but it's not just about selling off sites and sitting back. It's a really active role that we play. Similarly to the AHP and other challenges that people have talked about, it's a really challenging time at the moment, really trying to focus on both the existing sites that we've got and making sure that they stay viable in difficult times, but also bringing new sites to market. And we've got, just as an example, the land assembly which we've done around City Hall will be coming to the market next year, which takes a huge amount of work in terms of a procurement and broad strategic thinking to understand the outcomes that we want and within a wider placemaking and regeneration approach. So, you know, there's a lot going on in that area too, which we can go into later on if that's helpful.
I'm certain we can. In fact, what I was just going to say, so that was a sort of opening, start of a 10, if you like, from each of the organisations here. The format of the rest of the meeting is we'll then go one by one through each of those in more detail with my colleagues, starting with a section on GLA housing with my colleague, Assemblymember Fortune.
Thank you very much, Tim. This is for you, and just picks up on what you were talking about, which is the Affordable Homes Programme, which has been reduced, or the new target has been reduced from 35,000 down. Can you just inform the committee of what the new target is and how confident you are that we can hit that target by 2026?
Yeah, Heather can probably give the actual specific numbers, but the new target's a range between 23,000 and 27,000 roughly. You know, it's hard to be confident of anything at the moment because things are so uncertain, but we're working incredibly hard, as I've started to set out, to try and make sure that we are able to hit that target. We have done, you know, significant work over the last couple of years with government to seek to respond to the operating conditions which partners are working in. You know, we've done a huge amount of had a huge amount of dialogue with partners to understand their constraints and the things which might help, and we sought to reflect those within the programme, and that's part of the reason why the target came down. And you know, clearly we wouldn't have wanted to reduce the affordable homes target, but it became very clear that in some cases additional grant would have to go in, and obviously without additional funding then that necessarily means that the target becomes lower. And the reason for that range is that it makes a big difference whether or not we're delivering, for example, social rented homes, which are much more expensive in terms of subsidy, or shared ownership homes, which require less subsidy. So as that mix becomes clearer over the coming months and next couple of years, then we'll have a better sense of where in that target range we'll land.
Heather, did you want to pick up on what you think we can do or is being done to have confidence in hitting that target?
The only thing I would add, and this has been a theme that's been picked up by all of the panellists today, is that although there's an awful lot that we can't do, we do still have some partners and some projects that can deliver, and partners who are really keen to work with us and to make things happen if you work hard enough and collaboratively enough. And in some cases, again, as others have said, you can work counter-cyclically, looking at perhaps switching sites to 100% affordable, some market flips, you know, if you can make enough subsidy available. So it's having the concentrated negotiations on those sites to think about what can we do, and that's our approach.
Okay. And then on planning what can be done sort of year on year, I'm looking at a genuinely affordable housing delivery target 23-24 of 1,766. That comes from the Finance and Performance dashboard. So have you got any housing delivery targets for 24-25 you could share?
We're not in a position to be able to set sort of annual targets for the coming year yet because of the volatility that we've already heard about. I mean, the government still hasn't published the response to the second staircases consultation. As I say, that's holding so many homes up in limbo that trying to set annual targets at this stage is extremely difficult, but we remain committed to the overall target range.
Okay. So the 1766, that's the target for 23-24. Remind us if you're on track for that.
Yes, I'm confident that we'll hit that target this year.
Okay, but we don't yet have a target for 24-25 because of the factors that Tom set out.
No, and in fact, they talked about issuing the detailed guidance in December, but more recently I think we've been hearing about the new year, so it's actually been a slight further delay. So
there's no sort of ballpark figures. Is it going to be somewhere in that same region, 1.7 thousand?
No, it's very difficult to say at this stage. Assembly Member Fortune is what I would say to you.
Okay, that's fine. I understand that there have been no new construction starts for the affordable housing programme 21-26. Is that going to have an impact on the target for 24-25?
There have now been starts under the 21-26 affordable homes programme in Q3, I believe.
Okay, what's the updated figures? Because I haven't had those.
Well, we won't publish the Q3 figures. The Q3 figures will be published in January, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And you're not going to give us a hint or any kind of ballpark?
I can't give it. No, we remain tight-lipped as always until the figures are published.
Okay. All right. There's a 454 million reduction in the affordable homes programme next year. Can you just give us some background behind that? And I understand it's been agreed between the GLA and government. And again, how is that going to impact delivery for 21-26?
Yes, so obviously our original budget forecast was set before the rebid process. So as I say, that's what just reflects the change from the 35,000 to the new range. And as I say, we're expecting to fully meet that a target within that new range with the budget attached to it.
So hopefully then there's an element of flexibility around the 21-26 programme. So I wonder if we could have a look at what kind of houses we're going to deliver. Is there an opportunity to deliver larger family-sized homes? Is that something you can look at and review?
I mean, we can deliver what our partners are prepared. Obviously, at this stage, we're working with sites that are already fairly well progressed in their planning process. So there's a limit to that kind of impact that we can have. But yes, we've obviously set various requirements to the 21-26 programme of design and building safety and equality and diversity. So we'll certainly be pushing on all of those fronts.
Okay, fabulous. And I shall look forward to an email from Tom in January with the figures from Q3. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Assembly Member Fortune. Continuing this section, Assembly Member Berry.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I want to speak to Tom, first of all. One of the things we've asked you previously was how you've sought extra funding from the government to do more within the 2021-26 programme, maybe to get back up to the target. Now, you've written back to us, I think, and said the government appears to be unwilling to consider any additional funding, unfortunately. While it has given us very welcome flexibilities on the AHP, funding appears to be a red line. Can you talk to us about what future strategies you're considering to try to change the government's mind on that and maybe get some more funding?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. Of course, the Housing Delivery Task Force, one of its key recommendations was the injection of an additional 2.2 billion to bring us back to the 35k figure. And of course, we've got that sort of slightly larger, longer-term goal of £4.9 billion a year for overall affordable homes funding. We keep making the case to the government, whether that's in meetings with ministers, when we write to the government, as we did collectively with the entire sector through the Housing Delivery Task Force, and there may well be opportunities, depending on the outcome of the election next year, to make further interventions following that to make the case for that additional funding in London.
Okay, and there aren't any particular ways in which you're urging the government to think about this in terms of value for money?
We do,
or,
yes. I see where you're going with this, Assembly Member Berry. Yes, in fact, the last week or the week before, we published a new GLA housing research note, which has revealed that if we were to fix all of the hazards within the housing stock, it would cost about £1.2 billion, but it would save the NHS £100 million a year. So we would see within 12 years' time, that would be paid back. And I think this is the key argument to be making, whoever is in power. It's the investor save argument. That is simply one part of it. That's the impact on the NHS. Of course, there's going to be many more impacts as well. If we're building more social rented housing, that's fewer people living in the private rented sector being supported by housing benefit, which has been ballooning, as we know, because of the high cost of private rents. There'll be a boost to GDP in the economy as well. If people are taking fewer days off sick because of poor quality housing, that's going to be a boost to the economy. And of course, if children are not overcrowded, they've got space to do their homework, they're probably going to do better at school.
Oh,
Tim,
would you like to add to that?
Yeah, just to add that, you know, we're also seeking to do the legwork on this with the officials in the department, and we've got some really good engagement with the officials, and we're both looking at the specific recommendations of the task force and the kind of consensus that there was across the London sector there in terms of some of the recommendations. But we're also looking at the work of the London Partnership Board, which has sought to make this broader economic case for investment in housing in London, and taking the officials through that, and also looking in detail at some of the impacts of a lack of housing in local neighbourhoods. And a week or two ago, I was in the department with the Borough Chief Executive to talk about the issues they're facing with temporary accommodation and the cost of that. And we know that new supply is a key response to that problem which is being faced.
Can I make a further point just off the back of that? And I was going to make it at the start before the chair rightly cut me off. But we know that boroughs are spending £60 million a week at the moment between them on TA. That's about £740 million a year. The average of this affordable homes programme per year is £800 million a year. So it seems ridiculous to me that we would be spending, almost as much housing people in temporary accommodation as we're spending on new supply. We should really be pushing the funding on new supply. And although the savings do come further down the line, that's very, very true, there are very, very real savings to investing up front in social and other forms of affordable housing.
Excellent. Are you working with councils on that? Because obviously some of these costs are pushing councils in London to the brink, and so there would be savings there from not cutting other services, for example.
Yes, absolutely, and I'm very worried about this. We've seen councils across the country going under. So far, only one in London, but I'm extremely worried, and I think if something does push a council over, it will probably be the cost of TA. That's why councils were so keen for us to launch the CHAP programme, the Council Homes Acquisitions programme, the successor to Right to Buyback, because they would much rather be bringing properties back into their ownership to let out as temporary accommodation than paying very high rents to house people privately.
Okay, for other members of the committee, we'll have questions about that later on. I want to turn to Tim now to ask about City Hall developer. I know that the Mayor previously committed to piloting this. However, we have we have an answer from to a question by Assemblymember Bailey, where it says the Mayor has changed his priorities on this. Here we go. And the Mayor says, I've concluded the best option at this stage is to focus on public-private partnerships via joint ventures and investment partnerships on our land. Can you outline the committee the reasons for this quite dramatic change of approach from what was originally in the Curzike brief?
Yeah, I think it's kind of debatable how dramatic a change of approach it is, and perhaps we can debate it. But there's quite a lot of work's been done on this in Simon's team, particularly around engaging with the sector in London and trying to understand what would be helpful, what would really drive additional housing delivery. So we've been looking with providers and others in the sector to kind of scope out what options and delivery models might help. We've been talking to everyone around this table as well about that. And I think the key conclusions that come out of that are that there's there is demand in the sector for greater risk sharing, particularly in the current economic context. And that is something that, where the public and private sector can come together effectively. Historically, we've tended to deliver sites through development agreements, so where they seek to place the delivery obligations and the risk with the private sector. And I think that, combined with the fact that we're quite constrained in terms of the finance that we can put forward ourselves as the public sector at the current time, it means that if we can make a contribution around land, if we have it, and then ask the private sector to come in with some development capital, then these kind of public-private models can be quite effective, we think. But we're really focused on seeking not to deliver what's already out there, not to create additional competition for resources, for talent, and so that's why we're focusing where we are at the moment. And in many ways, it remains the spirit of what Kerslake was talking about, which is that the City Hall kind of really coming in to the development space is really still there within that model.
Can I stick with Tim for a moment and just get some clarification on what you mean by the private sector? Because the Kerslake conclusions were that there should be a phased approach to this, and phase one should be collaboration with the affordable housing sector rather than the market providers. And we know that London's had very slim pickings from market providers in terms of affordable housing for quite some time now. Kerslake was recommending working with housing associations, presumably. Are you really switching to private developers now as a focus? That seems very, very different. That's why I said dramatic.
Yeah, no, so I mean, actually, we shouldn't interpret private to mean only private sector developers. I think housing associations, absolutely, we'd be looking at whether we can partner in this way. I think that one of the key questions around how we together can bring in financing, and that's one of the things that we're really focused on, whether that's with housing associations or developers, and often they're themselves already in partnerships anyway.
Okay, I mean, so to me it seems like we're looking at things on GLA land, and if that was going to be used with not-for-profit housing associations, that's very different to if parts of the value of that land were going to go into actual profits for shareholders. Those are two very different things. Tom,
can I come
philosophically, where are you on this?
I don't think the Mayor's vision on this has changed at all. I think what's changed, certainly in the short term, we hope it'll be short term anyway, is the economic environment. When Lord Kerslake published his report, that was mini budget. It was the soaring interest rates that we've seen in the financing costs, and that has presented an enormous challenge to the whole sector, and we are not immune from that. The vision remains very much the same. What we're adapting to is the changed circumstances, and that's why I think that pursuing these partnerships are very important. You mentioned GLA land. At the moment, we tend to use development agreements on GLA land. If we were to actually, pursue joint ventures as opposed to development agreements, that is a step forward, which would lead to greater control, for example. But of course, we're not just looking necessarily at partnerships on GLA land. We're looking more broadly at partnerships as well. And I think that there's a real role for us here to be able to support the sector, which is struggling through these very, very difficult times. And that does not preclude us from then going out and pursuing our own opportunities ourselves in the future.
Okay, I wonder if you could keep us informed about that and make sure that if there is a mayoral decision coming forwards for any disposals and things like that, we get a view from potentially Kerslake and the Assembly before that is actually published, because I think that is a big change from things that came out of processes we all participated in good faith.
I don't think it's beyond what Lord Kerslake set out in his recommendations. I mean, it might be, as I say, I think this is about adapting to changed circumstances, and then there's nothing that precludes us from proceeding in the way that you have described in the future. I mean, we're in just exceptionally difficult times at the moment, and I think that we have to do what we can as a public body to maximise delivery in the current circumstances. And actually what we're talking about doing is still a step forward, quite a significant step forward in terms of what the role of the GLA and how the GLA intervenes in London. And to Tim's point, I think Tim's point was important, and Kerslake was very clear about this. We have to be looking at where we can provide additionality. We don't want to displace activity. No one benefits from that. We have to look at where we can add value and boost development. And at the moment, this would seem to be the best way to do that.
Okay, I'll leave it there for now, and I'll come back with my final question that's on the paper, although I do have a supplementary. What insights have emerged from the assessment of the 2016 to 23 affordable housing programme so far, and to what extent have these insights shaped the strategic decisions in planning, budgeting and forecasting for the 2021 to 26 affordable housing programme? And I think that question's really to Tim, probably.
Yeah, we're just in the process of finalising a kind of lessons learned bit of work, and I think that's going to be shared with the Assembly very soon, actually. I think in terms of shaping the 21 to 26 programme, you know, the timings didn't work out very well. You know, our key kind of delivery window for 16 to 23 was earlier, was, you know, within the last 12 months, and many of the kind of design decisions for the 21 to 26 programme were taken before that. So I think in many ways it's what the 16 to 23 programme is likely to inform our thinking going forward from here in terms of how the 21 to 26 programme develops and what the programme after that looks like. And it, you know, now is a really, really important moment to be thinking about what post 2026 looks like, given how close that is, and we're seeking to have those discussions with the department, using the lessons that we've learned from 16 to 23 as well.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing the lessons learned document. And then finally, I've got a question about essentially spending the money, allocating, not just allocating the money, but getting it off our books. And as you'll remember, there were comments from the Audit Commission about the fact that we were holding a lot of cash that came from the 2016 to 23 programme. I know that the aim is that the 21 to 26 programme will be fully spent on starts by 26. Are we on track to do that? And then as my supplementary question, can you tell us of the 2016 to 23 affordable housing programme, we've got your new capital spending estimates in the GLA Mayor budget documents. How much will actually be left on our books at the end of that period? So that period goes up to 26-27 currently in that draft budget.
So in terms of our confidence on spend across both programmes, as we've mentioned earlier, we obviously revisited those budgets, and I'm confident, looking at all of the projects that we have and all of the conversations we've had with partners, that we'll meet our spend targets both on the 16 to 23 existing programme and the 21 to 26 programme. I don't know whether...
Can you expand on what those targets are? Because I know for 26 to 23, you weren't expecting to have allocated all of the money, even by the end of 26 to 27. Some of the allocation, some of the spending and handing over of that money was going to proceed right into the 2030s. So I wanted to know at the end of the current budget period what will be left.
I mean, one of the great advantages of 16 to 23, and something, if I wish we could take the lessons learned from that, because it enables us to invest in longer, more complex and important projects, you know, which do go on into future years. So yes, we have got completions going on beyond 2026, and yes, some spend attached to that. But the bulk of the but the whole allocation has been made, all of the starts have happened, and all of the, and we're not holding on to the upfront payments that were, that you referred to earlier. All of that was committed. We've had a proper reconciliation, and DLUC have paid everything that's due on top of that funding. So we're in a very strong position now in terms of our forecasting with DLUC for both programmes.
Can I just add, because there is an error in the figures in the budget document. Oh. So in 27-28 for the 16 to 23 programme, in 27-28 it looks like £4 billion worth of spend on 16 to 23. That isn't correct. that should be more like 30 odd million. So
Can you tell us which page of the budget
I
to
don't
look at, please?
actually have the document in front of me. I'm sorry, I've just got these figures. But you can see how the 16 to 23 spending tails off. You know, we've got 272 million in this financial year, 180 next financial year, then 60, 49, kind of 30, and then in the final period of 28 to 33, we've got about 30 million as well, and that is the final period we're expecting to spend against the 16 to 23.
Tim, I don't think we've got figures that go that far forwards in the draft document.
You should do
I'm
in the
looking at
capital, in the capital strategy.
Strategy Appendix I think it is.
I'm sorry, I don't have the document in front
That's
of
not
me.
very. That's, yeah. Okay. Well, if we don't have it in that document, if you can double check, can you provide that to us, please, so we can see the future spending, and then the figures that are there, they would go all the way up to the end of spending that, so we can see what's still in. Because that was the question, really. I couldn't find the numbers.
Yeah, I think we can provide you those figures. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much. I've got a few questions just on the whole area. So, Tom, the GLA Housing Performance Report for Q2 shows an underspend of £34.5 million on building safety, which is due to challenges in estimating costs ahead of grant claims. Do you estimate that the budget will be spent by the end of the year, and will there be any implications for next year in this building safety area?
I might have to pass over to Tim for this one.
Tim.
Sorry, Caroline.
No, that's fine, Tim.
Yeah, building safety, it's really hard to forecast, and this year's been particularly difficult because of the government's intervention around the developer pledge. So that's meant developers signing up to take on costs to remediate buildings, which is really good news, but it also means that they come out of our programme. So we've had a number of schemes coming out of the Building Safety Fund, which has changed the forecast. The good news is that all of these costs are entirely matched by government, so whatever the spend position by the end of this year will be a net zero impact for the GLA.
Okay, so that's why that you've got the underspend because of that change.
Yeah,
okay, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear on that and whether there are any implications for Londoners who are obviously caught up in this. A couple of other questions I had. I was just looking at some information we've got here on mayoral housing priorities, and I think it was a press release that the mayor put out calling on the government to deliver 470 million brownfield development boost to build 76,000 homes. Do you have any of the detail behind that so we can understand that money, how you would build 76,000 homes? Because we can all claim all sorts of things, and clearly there's a lot of number crunching behind it. Are you able to provide us with that detail so we can understand on which land you're looking at using, what this really means in reality?
So this is a calculation based on the success we've had administering the land fund at the moment. So this would be funding that would go in, for example, into sort of infrastructure like station improvements and things like that. I'm sure we could provide you, following the committee meeting, with a little bit more of a detailed background that is exactly how we arrived at those figures.
I think that'd be really helpful just to understand that, because it's a big claim, and it's if you could deliver that, that's great. But actually, how does that work?
I should add these are total homes as well. So this is not just affordable housing. This is homes of all tenures.
Of all tenures. And then I just wanted to pick up, and it might be with Simon actually. It's best to pick this up with. You talked about work you're doing with GLA land. Talked about land around City Hall being developed. Goodness, it'd be nice to actually have something going on around here, wouldn't it? But actually. The Housing Association, we had the chair of the G15 before us last week, who was saying actually the sector's really starting to focus on their existing stock. That big sort of expansion that we've seen over the last decade or two from housing associations may not be the same agenda. So are you confident that going out with these sites, and it probably would apply to your colleagues here as well, you are going to have the interest from the housing association partners that you need and the interest to be able to deliver those affordable homes?
Yeah, thank you. So we're actually out in the market at the moment for a couple of sites, one directly on GLA-owned land and one on behalf of MOPAC that we're development managing as part of the wider kind of Kerslake implementation and the Homes for Londoners collaboration programme. I guess the intelligence from actually being in the market over the last 6 or so months has shown us that you're right, there is there is limited appetite, but yet there is still some appetite with affordable housing providers that are engaging and coming forward. And we're hoping to close off the procurements for both of those projects in the next few months. But there is limited appetite, but at least there is still some appetite.
Is it some of the smaller ones who are wanting to expand rather than the huge ones that have grown, you know?
They would be G15 members.
Oh, they would be still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, it's just the point that came up last week, and I was just wondering whether there actually was going to be that appetite, despite having the money. Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. Going to turn to Lynn for the first question about the Council Homes Acquisition Programme, if you have details, but if others have the answer, feel free to as well. How does the cost of buying a home through the programme compare with grant levels for social rent under affordable housing programme?
So I'll take that, Assembly Member Hirani. So yes, in terms of the Council Homes Acquisition Programme, we've published grant rates for that. So it's £85,000 per unit for essentially for temporary accommodation for homes that will be let out at LHA rates, and then £200,000 a unit for social rent. Comparisons are difficult because we don't have fixed grant rates for the rest of the programme. So for the rest of the programme, partners bid, and then we come to an agreement on a negotiated grant rate. And we don't give out average grant rates because obviously that would then indicate to partners perhaps where they should be aiming to. So I can't give you a direct comparison, unfortunately.
Okay, just on that, so given London Council is spending approximately £60 million a month on temporary accommodation...
A week, actually. A week.
A week?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, the figures I have say a month, but a week on temporary accommodation. What do you anticipate the impact of upfront investment? Because that's what this essentially is. It's a home ready to occupy for someone in temporary accommodation. What impact will it have on local budgets?
I think that would vary from council to council, and of course it would depend, where their costs are currently. Are they spending a lot of money on people in nightly paid accommodation, for example? If they're doing that, then being able to switch over to homes that they've bought themselves, letting out at LHA rates, is going to be far better for their the budget on the general fund. So it will vary from council to council, but we know that we've had an awful lot of interest in this from councils across London. It was a key ask of the Housing Delivery Task Force. So we know this is something that councils are really desperately need as part of their work to deal with the temporary accommodation crisis.
Okay, and what risks or potential downsides were considered before launching the new CHAPS programme?
Potential downsides. I think with anything like this, obviously we have to be looking at the funding that we've got, how best that we can spend it. We have an acquisitions cap, for example, so we can only do up to 10% of the programmes as acquisitions. We have to make sure that this represents good value for money, of course. But I think having looked at all of this, not only were we very clear that this was something that was necessary and needed, boroughs were very, very clear that it's something that they needed as well.
Okay. Tim, Heather, did you want to come in on any of that?
No, I mean, obviously, it's you could argue that these might be homes that other people, might affect affordability in a local area, but I don't think we think that will be a material impact, and we're really clear that these are homes that people. It's really great that people will be able to move into them so quickly. We've got one council that are buying some market accommodation off the shelf. I think 185 homes. So those, 185 families can move in the next few weeks and save an enormous amount, as Tom said, on temporary accommodation costs. So I think that's a price worth paying.
I think the market impact is an important one that was considered. Of course, we know at the moment that there's downward pressure on house prices. We've seen house prices coming down in London. We also know that there are private landlords who are very, very keen to exit the market, many of which will own homes that would be suitable for councils then to purchase. You know, a lot of homes that councils will be buying back may well be homes that they sold on the right to buy, which are being rented out by a private landlord, perhaps back to the council itself in order to house families in temporary accommodation. It makes a lot more sense to cut out the middleman and for councils to own these properties directly.
So some boroughs have or host private landlord forums to help with information to the sector and identify sort of housing partnerships in particular boroughs. Is that an avenue you have considered? Considering that so many private landlords are looking to exit the market as such?
I mean, I hope boroughs would signpost that through these forums. We have our private rented sector partnership, which brings together most, if not all, of the boroughs around London to share best practice and things like that. So perhaps that's something that I can ask our private rented sector team to pick up through our private rented sector partnership to encourage them to signpost. Boroughs to signpost landlords if they are participating in the CHAPS programme.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because if you imagine, I think your, the London-wide forum compared to the local forums, you'll have more likely smaller size, or landlords with smaller property portfolios in there that might be just concentrated in a particular borough, not necessarily in your forums, and it might be a useful way to get, the 183 example. Helping one particular borough is quite helpful, but I think lots of different boroughs across London would find that also helpful to relieve their temporary accommodation budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kripesh. Assembly Member Rogers.
Thanks, Chair. A question for Lynn. Good morning. The Kerslake review identified a number of GLA-owned sites that said would be good opportunities to deliver new housing. 8 Albert Embankment, the North Middlesex Hospital, and the Limo, which I'm presuming is the Limo Peninsula, Canning Town. I'll come to 8 Albert Embankment later, but I just wondered if you could give us an update on the status and potential future uses for North Middlesex Hospital and the Limo, please.
Yeah, I think it's probably a Simon answer.
Absolutely, Simon, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. So I can talk directly to North Middlesex. So that's one of the two procurements that I just referenced in response to Assembly Member Pigeon's question. So we are coming to the end of, hopefully coming towards the end of the procurement for a residential-led development on that hospital site that was acquired by the Mayor a couple of years ago. So that one is looking to be the procurement and the partner, which will be a private sector partner but working in partnership with a G15 affordable housing provider in the early part of next year. So there will be a decision on that coming forward in the not too distant future. And then Limo, I would pass across to Graham Craig, because it's a Places for London site.
It is indeed. It's one that, with positive market interest, we're looking to bring to market in January, next month. But we are embracing the Kerslake report and the spirit behind it. You know, we are in close discussions with the GLA about how we can work together in order to bring that site forward.
Thank you. And do you yet know how many homes you hope to be able to deliver on each of these sites?
1,200 in the case of Limo.
And North Middlesex?
It's up to about 250.
250?
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you. I'll come to Albert Embankment at a later section, so back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that concludes our sort of opening section on the GLA housing area. I was going to take a break, actually. I thought that section would take longer than it has. So read what you like into that. But actually, I think we'll press on with the next section, which is Places for London with Assembly Member Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Yes, so we've got some questions primarily for Graham, if that's okay. Firstly, obviously, I believe we've got a business plan more detailed business plan coming out next week. So these are a bit in advance. So hopefully you have information to give us. But firstly, what are your expectations for delivery of housing starts and completions for Places for London in 2024-25?
Well, first of all, I should say that the business plan is due to be agreed by the TfL board tomorrow. What I don't have here, for the reasons I think Tom previously set out, is detail on the housing starts for next year. Really, we need to know where we are, particularly in relation to the building safety regulations being published in terms of second staircase. I would say, and I have said earlier, the focus for the moment for next year, the primary aim for next year is pursuing those planning applications, particularly the large sites at Earls Court and Edgware. We are keen to make progress on the almost 4,300 sites. Well, the proportion of them that are under construction. In terms of new starts for next year, I don't have numbers and really won't have until we're in a position to know where we stand on the building regs.
Understandable. And I'll ask a couple of follow-ups about the impact of those building regs in a moment, if that's okay. But just to come back, you said earlier on that Places for London is now separate from TfL, or sort of financially separate from TfL, and sort of is financially sustainable. So how confident are you that Places for London is financially sustainable in the long term, particularly when balanced against achieving the goal of making 50% of homes in your development plans affordable? Okay,
well, I am confident, but let me drill into that. We're financially separate from TfL, and I should explain what that means in practice. So we take no funding from TfL, either operating expenditure or capital. The profit that we make from recurring revenues gets paid as a dividend back to TfL. So TfL is still financially incentivised to support what we are doing. And I have to say that in terms of our ability to develop homes, commercial offices, other uses above and around the transport network, it's extraordinarily helpful that TfL has skin in the game. In terms of our confidence going forward, we have a business plan for Places for London that's incorporated into the TfL business plan. We are forecasting over the next 10 years that we'll be investing £700 million net in enhancing our existing assets and delivering new assets. With TfL, we have 4 shareholder objectives that they set for us. Growing shareholder return and asset portfolio value, delivering the homes, including the affordable homes, the workspaces and the neighbourhoods for London, the transport benefits for TfL, and we're currently forecasting that over 10 years we will be delivering £200 million worth of transport benefits for TfL, in addition to the dividend that TfL gets. TfL is also clear that one of the key objectives that we have is to grow a sustainable and inclusive business. Along those lines, we have a variety of financial metrics that we have to achieve. You'd expect those because we're also debt funded. So with the banks, we need to be in a position in which we can demonstrate at all times that we are not only a going concern, but a business in which, looking ahead, we're always in a position to be able to manage the debt and other liabilities that we've got. Now, how that plays out in practice is that we have a £200 million credit facility in place with 3 banks. We currently have not drawn down any of that £200 million debt facility. So that £200 million debt facility is there to cover any commitments that we have made. The way in practice in which we fund our activity at the moment is, whilst TfL gets 100% of the profit from recurring revenues, if we make a one-off capital receipt, either a profit from a joint venture or where we're disposing of a property that doesn't fit in with our long-term investment strategy, we can recycle that within Places for London. The debt facility, therefore, at the moment is to make sure that we're always in a position to pay any expenditure that may come along, even if we're in a position where for some inexplicable reason we were unable to sell any properties or unable to realise any joint venture profits. So we go to extraordinary lengths. We're conscious these are public assets. We are committed to 50% affordable housing, but none of us wants to take any risk whatsoever. So we're always in a position in which we can pay our way, not simply now, but in the future.
Thanks, that's very helpful. And yes, obviously we need to make sure that TfL can continue to run the transport network as well as contributing to the situation we have in London around housing. So thanks for that. So you've also described how revenue comes into TfL, and thanks for that, and obviously how what money will also go back into Places for London. How much do you expect to be generated in this way, revenue? Is that also does that also depend on numbers which you're waiting to sort of finalise?
The majority of the money that we make comes from our existing estate. So we've got 1,500 commercial tenants. 95% of those tenants are small and medium enterprises. We are proud of the fact that we've got so many small businesses on our estate. We expect to become, over the period of the next business plan, the most important incubator space for new business in London. That, I think, is something that will be a significant positive commercial gain for us, but we recognise in everything we do the wider value of the estate that we've got, and we look to maximise the environmental and social benefits from what we do, particularly, of course, in supporting small business in London. In terms of income, we are forecasting £85 million worth of income this year. That's gross income. If you look at what after the expenditure, which includes the management overhead to TfL, we're forecasting a net operating surplus of £33 million this year. We're expecting that over the 10 years of the plan, those numbers will double. So taking no money from TfL, delivering 50% affordable housing, putting £200 million worth of investment transport benefits forward, putting a further £200 million worth of investment into our existing assets, including £100 million to deliver net zero. On top of all of that, we also we double the profit that we are making, and of course that then flows straight back to TfL.
Thank you. Just going back to, you described the environmental and social benefits. So obviously some of the TfL estate, or Places for, I'm not quite sure how we'll describe it now, Places for London estate, has historically been low income, low turnover businesses that have provided really essential in terms of the commercial mix in London. How does the social value, how do you make sure that social value is fully incorporated into the decisions that you're making, considering the really desperate need to bring in money for our transport network? How do you make sure that you balance that?
I should begin by saying that we think that ultimately we will be more successful commercially if we operate in a way that recognises the environmental and social value of the estate. I think you can look at a number of organisations that have been successful in London, including the Crown Estate and Grosvenor, who have demonstrated there is no conflict whatsoever between considering social and environmental value as well as commercial value. And I promise, come to social value in a second, but from an environmental point of view, I know we're here to talk about housing, but the premium that is currently paid for the highest, most sustainable commercial office buildings in comparison with other stock is extraordinary. So the most sustainable commercial office buildings with the highest well-being for the people who work there are now worth considerably more than was the case before the pandemic. The market, meanwhile, has fallen out the bottom of those tired tertiary commercial assets. So by investing in the environmental credentials of our estate, we make more money than would have been the case. We are, for what it's worth, as measured, or we were last year, as measured by GRESB, which is one of the major leading international benchmarks, the third most sustainable diversified developer anywhere in the world. Whether we continue to make the top 3 this year, I'm not sure, but we will remain one of the most sustainable diversified developer anywhere on the planet. From a social value point of view, we absolutely recognise, we cherish, we are proud of the social value that our tenants offer. One of the things that I am keen that we do now that we are places for London and have more ability to invest is we should invest in our tenants, but I think we can also do more to share with London the fantastic work that's going on with our tenants, the numbers of the numbers of jobs, the numbers of apprentices, the amount of education, the value that those SMEs offer to their local communities is something that we are absolutely proud of. When it comes to working through how one deals with the trade-offs, I guess at least in part it's understanding that you can't solve every problem at every site. Across the piece, we'll always have a focus on environmental and social value, but sometimes in some locations the appropriate thing to do is to understand how one might optimise the commercial return. Elsewhere, we will consciously accept that we're not maximising the commercial return because there's a wider social environmental value. If you stand back and you understand how you address the balance of those things across the piece, our experience to date has and continues to be that you ultimately deliver better long-term revenue by working in conjunction with our tenants across London.
Thanks. And is there a sort of set framework for making those decisions in terms of where you optimise and where you decide consciously that that's not the right decision, or is it on a case-by-case basis?
We have policies. I'm very happy to share those policies with the committee, and those continue to evolve. We have a small business policy at the moment. We're looking to bring forward a social value policy next year. I'm very happy either collectively to the committee or to individual members, including on individual sites, to talk through the basis on which we make decisions, but it's all policy-led.
Thanks. That's helpful. I think certainly I'd be interested in that and looking at the social value policy when it comes out. I may be slightly off track, but just a couple of questions on second staircases because it's so crucial to you. So your quarterly performance report has said the starts on site, as you've said, are affected by the requirement of the 18 metres threshold on staircases, and you're waiting for the clear guidance. So you've said that it's still being affected. So how are starts on site specifically being affected for Places for London at the moment?
We're in a position at the moment where we can't bring anything forward. It's a situation where we know that it impacts buildings above 18 metres, but we don't know whether it's a second staircase, a second core that needs to be built. We don't know whether it's a second core with redundant lifts. It's been 12 months that we've had this uncertainty. We recognise, of course, the importance of building safety. Not that I think anyone is saying that a building with a single staircase is inherently unsafe, but until we actually know what the policy is going to be, there's no way in practice in which we can bring anything forward, nor do we know until we know what the conclusion is, we don't know what the impact could be in terms of having to resubmit planning applications, or also the viability challenges involved in having to redesign buildings. What I will say is that, of course, in any event, we are still committed to delivering the 50% affordable housing, so that this isn't something that we will use as an excuse in order to back away from those commitments. That's something that we're still keen to honour. That, of course, just means that until we're actually in a position where we know what the new rules are, we have no way in practice of being able to move forward.
Yeah, no. Understood. And are you able to, I'm not sure whether it's appropriate here or sending it to us, what projects have been paused because of the second staircase lack of clarity?
It's probably easiest if I send a note after the meeting.
And presumably that's had an impact on budgets and how clear you can be with budgeting over the next period.
Yes, yeah. It's just what we have, I think it's already been said, is a convergence of different factors. It's interest rates, construction cost, inflation. This is this on top of that. It's not easy to unpick the different elements, but certainly of those, the lack of clarity over the building safety regulations is the one that's hitting us hardest. It's the one that I'm probably personally most frustrated by, but certainly we can, with a note afterwards to the committee, set out the direct implications that it's had.
Thanks. Hopefully that's helpful. Back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was just interested in that discussion just then, in what was, you didn't use the word gentrification, but that's sort of what you were talking about, that you get the best quality space that commands a premium, you know, the best insulation, best environmental standards, best well-being standards, and comparing that with the sort of tertiary property that becomes harder to let. I don't know that I quite understood the answer to the question about how you would seek to provide the best quality accommodation. And I appreciate, and we're slightly off topic because we're on to perhaps commercial, but how you provide the sort of the highest quality, which is what people want, which commands a premium, which obviously is good news from the point of view of money going back to TfL, but without potentially squeezing out, I think, some of those, what we might call low-rent businesses, which I think is what the Assemblyman was asking about. I wasn't quite sure that I quite understood how you sort of square that.
Okay, so I wasn't, and you wouldn't use the word gentrification, and that wouldn't be appropriate. What I'm saying is that whatever we do, whether that is investing in refurbishing an arch or building a new commercial office building above Bank Station, we set the highest standards for ourselves in terms of the environmental standards that we seek to achieve. We are, I guess, the closest analogy to where we are from a Places for London point of view is like the London so-called Great Estates, the Grosvenor, the Crown Estate, these landed estates in London. But we absolutely recognise the fact that in our case, ours is an estate that reaches across London. It would be wholly inappropriate for us to imagine that we would drop a single cookie-cutter approach on every development that we do across the city. We therefore work very hard. We're going to be doing more development than anyone in London. We'll be involved in more local engagement than anyone in London. The only way in which we can be successful is to understand what the local requirements are, such that whatever we do, whatever investment we're putting in, and we're investing hundreds of millions of pounds, reflects and enhances that local area rather than tries to impose single standard, a single ethos anywhere that we build.
Understood. Okay. Just one final question from me. So obviously there have been some TfL / Places for London developments that have come through that haven't gone ahead, like Cannons Park and Cockfosters and Stanmore. What lessons sort of have been taken from those ventures?
Different lessons from each of the two ones that you've identified. So Cockfosters, 351 homes, 40% affordable housing in our joint venture with Grainger called Connected Living London. That is a scheme that has received planning consent from Ealing Council, we want to get on and get that scheme built. The reason that we've not been able to do so is because the Section 163, so that's the requirement that we have from the Secretary of State for Transport, was refused. If we're doing any development on operational land, and operational land in this context is a car park, we need to have approval under Section 163 of the GLA Act. We submitted Section 163 for Cockfosters and it was refused. So this is a scheme, 351 homes, 40% affordable housing, built on a car park used largely by people who are driving from well outside the M25, travelling past multiple network rail stations because it's convenient for them to travel into Cockfosters. But they are simply adding congestion impacts, air quality impacts, carbon impacts from driving further. We think that the appropriate use of land next to stations is for those to be providing the homes, particularly the affordable homes, that because it's the most sustainable, it's where people want to live, it's where they want to work. So it's a intense frustration from me. We have resubmitted the Section 163 to the new Secretary of State for Transport. We will see where we get to it. But these, it's a single site, but it's 351 homes that we want to bring forward. In the case of Stanmore and Cannons Park, I think one lesson that we've learned, and it applies to both of those sites, in that case with a very credible housing association delivering 100% affordable homes, the market is not the sole answer to everything that one might wish. You cannot simply dispose of a site to the market and assume that they will be successful in getting planning. It's part of the reason why the vast bulk of what we do now we deliver through joint ventures. We have 7 joint ventures, 6 of which are residential led. The 7th is Helical, that's our commercial office joint venture. We have an 8th one that we announced 2 weeks ago, which is for electric vehicle charging hubs, which goes beyond the remit of this committee. But us being involved long term in joint ventures, leveraging the network we've got and explaining ourselves what the benefits are of schemes, we have found that we've been more successful in planning applications where we're the joint venture party than we are simply to dispose of sites to others.
So is your intention to I'm sorry, so the Cannons Park and Stanmore, I apologise if I'm out of...
We have not resubmitted those schemes. We will consider in due course whether we bring them forward. We have no specific plans to bring them forward as things stand. Before bringing them forward, we would engage with the relevant local authority to understand their views.
And your model for bringing them forward, is it possible that you would then be able to pursue those in that joint venture way that you described?
If we were bringing them forward, it would be through a joint venture.
Okay. And the Cockfosters site, do you think there is a viable scheme there that could get approval and work?
It's already got approval from the local authority. We're keen to get on with it. Us and our joint venture partner want to proceed with 351 homes. We want to get them built. At the moment, the one obstacle to that is the Secretary of State for Transport, where we need an answer on the Section 163 approval.
Okay, I think, did you see any other questions from... Assemblymember Baker.
Apologies, I just want to come back in just to clarify about the business plan. So you said that obviously there's an element of the TfL business plan which is Places for London, but are you bringing forward a separate business plan after that to the Land and Property Committee, or is that being superseded? Sorry, it was just information we had. I just want to absolutely clarify what's coming up.
From an approvals point of view, yes. Places for London is wholly owned by TfL. We might be financially separate, but we have one shareholder, and that's TfL. When our business plan is signed off, it is signed off by TfL. So when the TfL board meets tomorrow, they will be approving a TfL business plan that incorporates Places for London business plan. So there is no separate approval required. Whether it's helpful in due course for us to publish more detail on what specifically we are doing, that may or may not happen, but it certainly won't be part of any approvals process. The approvals that we need will be given by the TfL board tomorrow.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at that point, I don't see any other questions on TfL or Places for London. So I propose a short comfort break. So we'll return at 11:30, looking at LLDC. Thanks, everyone. Oh, I'll let Nick take his seat. Yeah. Okay, welcome back to this morning's Budget and Performance Committee meeting, where we are looking at housing, all the various housing elements within the GLA family. We now continue with Assembly Member Pigeon, who is looking at LLDC.
Lovely, thank you. I did just want to pick up something earlier, actually, that Graham said. I think it's Enfield Council with Cockfosters, not Ealing. Yeah, so that's my London-wide knowledge coming in there.
Apologies.
Let's pick up LLDC, Lynn, with you. Looking specifically, obviously, at housing, and I know you've had two different regimes with different mayors in terms of your affordable housing targets. Is it too late, really, for LLDC to deliver 50% affordable homes target, which, you know, Graham's talking about the land he's looking to develop, but so much of your stuff is already in programme. So is there any way you could achieve 50% affordable?
The 50% affordable target is attached to public land. So in terms of the homes that the land that LLDC owns and the homes being built on that land, they total 6,000 homes, just below 6,000. Of those, about 2,600 are already in contract. The remainder are subject to the 50%, and that's the two different regimes, planning regimes, essentially.
So what will it come out at the end?
About 42% overall.
So
yes.
Higher than the previous mayor's targets, but not
yes.
quite this. So
yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Okay. So that's significantly better than I think I'd had previously. That's good. What risk is there that the current plans won't be delivered once your planning powers are handed back, which is by the end of next year?
Virtually none, actually, I would hope. So the way we've structured this is that the planning powers go back on the 1st of December 2024. Mm-hmm. All of those sites that I've just spoken about will be in some kind of contract for delivery, and we hope that they will all have gone through the first stage of planning. There's one site at Rick Roberts Way that is in contract for delivery, and we're actively working on the planning application as I speak, and so that should have planning by the time the planning powers go back, well before then, we hope. That one is a development agreement at Rick Roberts Way. It's about 450 homes, a lot of affordable homes on that site, and the other two sites are in joint venture arrangements. Now, they are much bigger. Together they total around 2,100 homes, and they will come forward in phases, but they will be in contract, and they will have planning that will cement the 50% affordable target.
So the contracts are your mitigation, basically, because it's all there to be delivered. It's been signed, and there's no other mitigation you need to put in place.
And the planning, yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I think lots of people are slightly worrying we're moving into an uncertain time as your organisation changes. Can we talk about East Bank now, which is a very exciting development. I'm looking forward to coming and seeing it with you in the new year. But looking at it from a budget point of view, there's a 40 million increase in budgeted costs for the East Bank development in 23-24, and subsequent 50 million increase in 24-25. Can you talk us through that and what's really going on there? Maybe Gerry wants to come in as well.
I think I'll hand to Gerry.
Gerry, put your mic on. Over to you.
Apologies. There is a 53 million increase in the East Bank costs between the budget last year and the budget that we're putting forward this year. Some of that money we are drawing down this year. So in total, the increase over last year's budget is 53, of which 44 will be borne by the GLA and the Mayor. But we are we have drawn down, or are hoping to draw down a full 40 million of that this year.
Okay, so just to be clear on the, because maybe I'm reading my briefing wrong, 23-24 I've got £40 million increase, and then subsequent 50 million in 24-25. So that's
yes.
90 million in total.
It is. Last year's budget increase of 40 million, this year's budget increase of 50 million. Thereabouts. 53 you've just said. 53, of which 44 is borne by the Mayor. In fact, of that total, I think about 44 is borne by the Mayor.
Okay, so 93 million increase over 2 years. Tell us about what's leading to that. What are the factors? That's hugely significant.
It is hugely significant. So we have had ongoing design issues on the project.
What do you mean by that? Explain that, because I read that in my briefing and I thought, what do you mean design issues? I mean, how can that add £93 million to a...
So for example, on Sadler's Wells, we've had a lot of changes to the steel requirements in the roof and in the containment, so the how all of the utilities fit into the sawtooth roof. They're just two examples. But
so the original design didn't stack up when you came to build it, so you draw whatever on paper that gets through planning, but it can't actually be built.
To some extent, the Stage 4 design gets developed by contractors as they come in, and as they come in, the Stage 4 design gets refined, and some of that has required significant additional steel in the Sadler's Wells roof. That delayed all of the cladding and the roofing, which then delayed all of the MEP and the fit-out. So we're in this situation where one delay over here cascades, and we are finding still, even on the buildings that are substantially complete, there are still design issues. So on the BBC, for example, on Sadler's Wells, for example, there are still changes to the MEP fittings that are
MEP?
going mechanical and electrical, so the utilities, all of the utilities that go in. So there are still tweaks ongoing all the time that put pressure on the programme, and as the programme has delayed, there's delay and prolongation. As the programme's delayed, it gets concertinaed and it's more complex to try and manage it through. We've also had on East Bank a number of delays in supply, and particularly, for example, on the BBC, the glazing is well over, it's substantially late, which meant the follow-on trades, again, MEP, mechanical and electrical, and fit-out can't really start yet. And that's been an issue with, Lynn's very close to this because she talks to them weekly. That's been an issue of both supply and getting the stuff over here.
Okay, so trying to take a step back, is there something that you could have done at the start of these buildings around infrastructure? David talked earlier about OPDC are absolutely focused on getting the infrastructure right so that they can build out as they go. Is there something that, looking back, you should have done at the start to make sure you had the right infrastructure in order that you could build this out, or are these things that you could never have predicted?
I think it's quite difficult to know what we could have done differently in the circumstances. We had these are the four buildings are quite close together. They've all got their individual challenges. UAL opened in August to new students, but one of the subcontractors on UAL went into administration, so we're still picking up bits of work arising out of that. Sadler's Wells is very complex because it's a theatre building. V&A is complex because of its structure, and the BBC is very complex because there are acoustic requirements, very stringent acoustic requirements. So although four buildings in close connection with each other, gets built in the city every day, actually the buildings themselves are quite complex as well. I don't think we would have anticipated the level of ongoing design change. I don't know how we could have anticipated that at the start. We talked about I suppose there are various different contracting routes for developing buildings. We were fairly kind of constrained in how we could do that within the original timescales. And we were building in order to open UAL last year, but then we had the pandemic and we had delays arising out of that. So I think it's quite hard. It's obviously a question that we're going to have to ask ourselves, should we have done something different? But I think where we're at the moment, there's a very significant amount of intervention by us as client to try and move the completion of all the buildings on. So in the year, UAL open, all of the canal side public realm is open to the public, and V&A have got their fit-out contractors in. So there is some progress, but we are incredibly frustrated at the delays arising on Sadler's Wells and the BBC.
So some of the design issues have materialised as you have gone along, but has the scope changed from the initial project? So it's not.
So a really important point here. The design issues have not resulted from client requests or changes. They have all been to see out the original design intent, or for health and safety or building regulations. There's been very, very limited change in terms of client requirements.
Yeah, because you look at other, I think about transport infrastructure, you look at Crossrail, they kept changing the scope, so that costs more, and we see the same with High Speed 2. But we had previously called for a financial sustainability plan, given the rising costs of East Bank. Is that something that you have developed or are looking to, given we're talking about another £93 million here?
Well, we have agreed our forward funding plan, so that's the forward funding. That's the funding that we've agreed between last year and this year.
Okay.
In terms of additional requirement, we are, as you've heard from everybody, we have our long-term model depends on being able to pay back borrowing from the GLA. So they've had to put in additional grant to balance that out. We've had the costs of East Bank rising, but then also the viability concerns of developments that are pushing out starts on site and the receipt of land value. We had a transaction that didn't go through because of the reduction in overall land value on the market, the financing market. Financing costs are something else that we've heard about. Our overall projections for HPI and TPI they're both going in the wrong direction. So that's taken value out of our long-term model, and that's why we've agreed additional funding from the GLA this year.
Okay, but what are you doing to assess the rest of what's left to do on East Bank? What are you doing to prevent any further cost increases? Because it feels like every year we're here. And I think it's a fabulous project. I'm very excited by it. And everything always overruns up to a point. But this just feels significant. What are you doing to reduce any further increases, and also to look at the sort of financial sustainability of this whole part of the park?
Well, I think there's been significant intervention from LLDC and partners. So Lynn can talk about talking to contractors, the project management partner, and East Bank partners weekly. So this takes up an inordinate amount, not an inordinate, but as you would expect, a large amount of time. We do have a long-term model that we update every year. So we have recalibrated, but we are our financing requirements. So every year we have to be sustainable. We have to prove sustainability in our financing. This year has been very, very tough, and it's ongoing tough because of all the viability concerns. So we rely on receipts from the sale of land, ultimately whether it's in a DA or a joint venture or a land sale, to deliver the housing that we need, but also to bring money into the long-term model. So we do that every single year. So if you like, we take an annual snapshot. It's not that we only remember it annually, but it's constant in our minds. But we take an annual snapshot. The difficulty this year, so we feel that we've presented a balanced, a financially sustainable plan. However, as you've heard from everybody in the room, the uncertainty around development at the moment is the worst that I've experienced. So some of those future year developments we're trying to work through the viability of them.
I understand. Lovely. Thank you, Joe. You rest your voice a minute. Let me come to you, Lynn. Can you talk through, you've obviously become a glazing expert if you're dealing with this issue at the BBC building. Can you talk us through what you are doing to prevent any further cost increases and really manage this tightly?
Yeah, look, I think this East Bank development, and it's a lesson for the public sector in the round. It's a hugely complex project on a very constrained site. There's a bit of a perfect storm, isn't there, with starting a construction project just before COVID, suffering the impacts of Brexit. A lot of the supplies were coming from Europe, all over Europe, including the glass, which comes from a German company. We've heard about the design change and the errors that we've experienced, and of course that knock-on effect from the contractors. Every time there's a knock-on effect and a contractor reprices a job, we're facing increases in construction costs. So they're not repricing it at the price they gave us 5 years ago or 3 years ago even. They're repricing it at today's prices and taking advantage of the fact that they can also claim compensation for delay. So all of that has worked against us. What it says to me is about how we look at public sector development risk in the round. Yes. We are taking all of the risk on constructing this site. There are something like 37 different public sector procurements involved in that site because it's not a single tier contractor, as you know. We've run a huge public sector procurement. Virtually every procurement exercise came in over budget in comparison to the original cost plan in any case when the procurement was undertaken, and then there have been these delays. And it's hugely complex because the way that we've procured it, given the way of the build works and the design works, is some people are doing the glazing, others are doing the facades, 3 other companies are doing the roofs, and so on and so forth, which gives you this number of individual packages across the whole. That's hugely complex to manage. We use MACE as a construction manager effectively, but all of the risk is taken by the public sector. The reason I wanted to kind of point that out first before getting into the microscopic management that we're doing at the moment is that a question was asked by the committee earlier about direct delivery of housing.
Yeah.
We're facing a really challenging market. Kerslake did talk about using development agreements. He also talked about partnering with RSLs. But actually, if the public sector wants to keep control, but also keep value in land over the longer term, a joint venture has to be the best way forward. You've got a seat at the table. You control when the development can start or stop in accordance with your own targets. You're taking risk, but you're not taking all of the risk, you know. And so I think that the public sector joint venture model is a really good one, and colleagues around the table are more frequently starting to turn to that for larger projects in particular, where we can get more control. Moving back to East Bank, we've delivered 2 buildings essentially. We've handed over the V&A and the UAL. There are trailing wires. At UAL, we've had the mechanical engineering contractor went into liquidation. We've still got issues there, although they're in and they're using the building. The students are on the park, fantastic. The V&A is handing over for a specialist fit-out. It actually broadly handed over in November, and their fit-out contractors are in the building. That's a fit-out that they pay for. So we've not quite washed our hands of the V&A, but we've done the bulk of the work. I'm now concentrating on Sadler's Wells and the BBC. Since last August, I've been meeting on a weekly basis with individual contractors who are responsible for completing the building. So as each building is coming up for completion, I meet with Mace, senior executives from Mace, including the people on the ground, but also the chief executive and the people running the consultancy arm of the business. We have the client in the room. So for UAL, that would have been Heather, who's the FD, responsible for the handover of the building, and James Pannell, who's the Vice-Chancellor. And then I have the executive of the subcontractors who are responsible for the build. So we've been through UAL, I've been through V&A, I'm now approaching Sadler's Wells. This means that, having walked the site last week, I'm very close to the project. I know exactly what's going on and what needs to happen in the integrated programme. But it is highly complex, and things are going wrong as we go forward. So I do think we have a microscopic eye on it. But my broad comment is we entered into this project in good faith. It's been difficult, and it continues to be difficult. And the main thing to do is to complete the thing as quickly as possible. At the minute, we're looking at next summer for full completion at the moment. There's still time for things to go wrong and not to be properly integrated. So yeah, it's quite a hard slog, but I think the meetings that I'm attending appear to be working to a certain extent and getting the senior people at each company appreciating the level of integration that they need to do to drive the project forward. And be less focused on their own compensation events as contractors and more focused on driving the project.
Yeah. But what I take from that is you are trying to manage this to get these open next year or handed over, but actually the original contract was wrong, and that's the lesson here, isn't it? That it sounds that we've taken all the risk, and therefore in this uncertain time we are picking up.
It might not be wrong, but I think it's worthy of a look to see whether we ought to have procured it differently. That's what it says to me around, you know, a project like this where we're taking 100% of the risk. Now, sometimes that can't be avoided. Things like Crossrail and so on, you're building a piece of public sector infrastructure. But if there's an element of being able to hand over the risk, so for example, the obvious point here on such a complex project would have had a better risk share with the construction management company. That's the way I would. That's a question I would ask today in terms of our lessons learned.
Lovely, great, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Desai, did you have a supplementary question on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one question. Good morning, panel. Lynn, my question is to you. What budgetary factors explain the falling percentage of affordable homes across the LLDC, and can anything be done to increase it?
What budgetary factors? Sorry.
Explain the falling percentage of affordable homes across the LLDC, and any steps that can be done to increase it.
In terms of bringing more land value in, for example. Sorry. Question.
At the falling percentage of affordable homes.
Oh, affordable homes.
Affordable homes, yeah.
LLDC.
Well, what's happened is we've got planning permissions in one mayoral regime for half of the homes that we own and control, our land that we own and control, and the other half in a different regimes, and that gives us the 42% overall on our own land. Factors to try to increase the affordable housing. Well, largely, I think this comes down to funding. Affordable housing right now, as we've heard across the panel, is under huge pressure because it's one of the areas that drives a viable project. So we will get 42% affordable housing where we've got viable projects. We've got difficulties at the moment with viability, so completely committed to achieving 50% in the remaining land holdings, but that is going to have an impact on land value. That would be my prediction going forward, and therefore would cost more at the end of the day.
Okay. Leave it at that.
Thanks, Assemblymember Desai. I think before we finish, I don't see any other indications on this site. So I have one quick final question. The sphere, what are the prospects of it going ahead? And if it doesn't go ahead, what are the prospects of what may then occur on that wonderfully disused coach park that's still there?
I can tell you things that I know. There's a lot that I don't know.
That's all we can ask, Lynn. That's all we can ask.
But and this is in the public domain. I understand that MSG purchased that land at a huge premium. I've kind of got in my head that it was something in the order of £60 million that they purchased the land for. So the piece of real estate is an expensive piece of real estate, actually, by anybody's books, if they were going to try and sell it on and achieve a similar value, especially in today's market. So there's that to consider. MSG are also in the public domain, and they've said this to me personally, that they're looking in other countries for investment and not in London, following the Mayor's decision. We also know that the Secretary of State is interested in calling the application in for determination. But of course, in an election year, and given the length of time that that process takes, there's a lack of clarity on where that might end up. And I think that's about it in terms of what I know, all of which is in the public domain, really, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, there's an interesting point about the value of the site and the ownership of the site. I think that perhaps is the most telling point about what might happen. Okay. Oh, Tom.
Just to say, I believe in the emerging Newham draft local plan, it's allocated as a town centre and housing. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously the challenge is about the land ownership then, isn't it, and what might be able to happen with it, depending on the view of the current landowner. I don't see any other questions. Oh, so remember Desai.
Yeah, Tom is right. I think this was yesterday that there was some discussion about the local plan at Newham Council and about whether proposals for, I'm just trying to find it, but to have employment and housing zone as a telco's sort of led proposal. But let's see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that particular site, Tom's absolutely right. It's a town centre site, and obviously we'd expect that because it is right in the town centre. We therefore have to look at what kind of viable use and what kind of sales strategy MSG are going to have, and we're not party to that at the moment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, thanks everyone. I think that's it for LLDC. Thank you, Lynn, and for your extensive answers to our questions. And we have then a brief section with Assemblymember Rogers on the London Fire Brigade property.
Thank you very much. I mentioned earlier that we're going to come back to 8 Albert Embankment. I think probably best directed to you, Tom, unless you want to direct it elsewhere. But I know there's a bit of history here. Essentially, where are we and what's the future for that site now?
Oh, a bit of history, Assemblymember Rogers. Goodness me. I mean, if you want to go back into the dim and distant past, this has been running on, I think, for 15 years, since 2008, when Native Land were in, I think, an agreement with London Fire Brigade. The most recent scheme, of course, dates from 2016. It went through planning. It was called in by the then Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, who has been in the news more recently for other reasons, and refused, which I think was a real shame, because we could have had spades in the ground on that site now, delivering a scheme with 40% affordable housing, a new fire station, a fire museum, and commercial as well as of course restoring the beautiful listed building by the river. It's very true that we are expecting an awful lot out of that site. The fire station alone, which I should say is absolutely essential. It's a strategic fire station. It serves the Houses of Parliament, which, if we believe what we read, is a bit of a death trap at the moment. It is not, put it this way, not in the kind of condition I would want our firefighters to be working in at the moment. It's crying out for investment, really. You know, we need a modern fire station there. So what we have done since the scheme was turned down is we are looking at the site. We are looking at delivering a viable scheme that can deliver that fire station, that can deliver us the affordable housing that we need, that is in line with Lambeth's sort of desires and requirements around this key industrial and business area, which is in their local plan. We have been making progress. It's a good example of group collaboration. We initially had a member of staff from Places for London seconded over to work on it. We currently have a member of staff, an officer from the GLA, working on the project. We discussed it in detail at the the last Homes for Londoners GLA Group Delivery Subcommittee in one of the private sessions, which are the sort of real the sort of real ways this subcommittee adds value is our ability to get into some of the weeds of these schemes with colleagues, and we hope in due course to be able to bring forward a viable scheme. You and I, now part of Landsec, are still in a development agreement with London Fire Brigade. They have stuck with it, which I think is very positive. And I don't know, Simon, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I understand that there's a decision being made by the London Fire Commissioner quite shortly on this proposal. There should be some news in this regard imminently. And I think that's all we can say.
That actually was going to be my next question, because my understanding was that the intention was to submit a planning application before this month. So do you know whether what has happened with the timescale now?
I think the latest I've heard is that is going to be early next year. Is what is hoped for.
Okay. That's it from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rogers. Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you. Quick question to Tom, really, to ask whether there were any additional sites which the LFB could release for housing that you were aware of.
Not that. Am I still on? Yes. Not that I'm aware of currently. I don't think they have of all the GLA Group organisations, they have a very small estate. Of course, historically, there have been fire stations which have been disposed of, but I'm not aware currently that there is anything coming forward from the LFB. Certainly, and certainly there would be nothing as significant as this particular site.
Thank you. We now come to our final section, certainly not our least section, the Old Oak Common and Park Rural Development Corporation, with Assemblymember Pigeon.
Hi, I'm David. High Speed 2. Must love those letters and numbers. What impact is the sort of part cancellation of High Speed 2 and changes having on your future delivery plans? And how are you managing to come up with anything with all those uncertainties?
So the change to the scope for...
Can you put your mic on, sorry?
Sorry.
No.
There we go. So, of course, there have been two fairly recent changes to the scope for HS2. First of all, the pause, as I think High Speed 2 put it, on the Euston link, and then more recently, of course, the Prime Minister announced the cancellation of the northern leg to Crewe and Manchester, and what I think is possibly an indefinite, for the time being anyway, pause on Euston, subject to a private sector solution to that element. We've spent quite a lot of time with colleagues at AHS2 and DFT to assess exactly what we think the impact's likely to be on our project. And happily, the conclusion that we've drawn is that there should be minimal impact. So clearly, OPDC, along with the Mayor, are anxious to try and find a solution as quickly as possible to the Euston link, because without that, as is well known, there are congestion challenges at Old Oak Common, because all passengers will have to alight and embark there and change trains. That was something that we were already aware of and are working closely with colleagues at HS2 and TfL to accommodate, because of the previous announcement on the pause to the Euston link. So that, in essence, doesn't really change anything of substance. The second issue for us really is whether, in particular, the postponement or the pause on Euston means that there's likely to be a delay to the release of one of the construction sites that's earmarked for development. So again, we're talking to HS2 about minimising that impact. We don't think it's going to be too serious in terms of our forward plans, but there will be a requirement from HS2 to have a section of what we call the Channel Gate site, where the tunnelling spoil emerges and is then taken away from site. So that is going to be reserved for construction activities until the point at which the Euston Link, because obviously that is in tunnel, that will require excavation, is completed. So there's some uncertainty around the programming of that. Having said all of that, there are a large number of strategic development sites that will be released by High Speed 2 as their construction programme, the confirmed construction programme, draws closer to a conclusion. And so the reservation at Channel Gate is not of particular concern to us at this stage, because any development at Old Oak is going to be phased in any way, at any rate. And so that site is likely to come forward towards the end of the programme. But we're pretty confident that there'll be sufficient construction activity and sites released to keep developers and investors and ourselves very busy for quite a number of years.
Remind me what the timescale is for your project, because you said that site would be at the back end.
Yeah. So the release of the major construction sites for development is not likely until the back end of the construction programme. So at the moment, HS2 is targeting a completion window for the project between 2029 and 2033. So we're not likely to see the bulk of those sites coming forward until, difficult to predict exactly, but 2027, 2028. So we're probably talking 4 or 5 years away, which actually is not that far away in terms of getting through complicated planning, infrastructure, procurement issues. But nevertheless, I think, as you can tell, the likelihood is that the release of those sites, and particularly the final reservation at Channel Gate for the excavation of any works relating to the Euston Link, is likely to be sometime beyond the early 2030s.
Okay. And
but sorry, just to conclude, just to finish, I mean, that sort of explains the release of the sites in terms of the overall construction programme for the project. I think at this stage it's very difficult to predict, but Old Oak West, which is our core regeneration area around the new High Speed 2 station, is projected to include between 9,000 and 10,000 homes and 2.5 million square feet of commercial space and all the ancillary infrastructure and amenities that you would expect from a new district in West London. So the overall construction programme is going to be very considerably beyond the early 2030s. It's almost certainly going to run through, I guess, to the 2040s and quite likely beyond.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming from what you've said. Lovely, thank you. And what about, obviously you said it's relatively minimal impact on your project, but there will be some impact. What are you doing? Obviously you're talking to DFT, TfL, HS2, but what are you doing to talk to the community and local parties such as the Old Oak Neighbourhood Forum with any proposed changes to make sure that the community is engaged? Yeah.
Well, we have a constant series of communications and engagement with all of our community and resident organisations and local businesses, including the Old Oak Neighbourhood Forum. We've been through a very lengthy process of community engagement to draft the new supplementary planning document for Old Oak West. We meet with the organisations that I've mentioned and others on a very regular basis. We had a major discussion in public at our board meeting a week or so ago when High Speed 2's station director at Old Oak Common and the Director General for DFT were present. We were very keen to make sure that that discussion was held in public so that local residents and those that were interested could hear the full account from the client side, if you like, of the impacts and how those are being managed. So I would say that we have a very constructive, close, regular and honest and frank engagement with our local residents and the organisations that represent them.
Great, thank you. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to actually pick up one of the points that was raised about working with partners from a budget perspective, because I think the impact of the cancellation of HS2 obviously has a knock-on impact if we're looking at transport infrastructure in the area as well, with the Elizabeth Line and also potentially the West London orbital. Given the decision that has been made to pause to Euston, you alluded that from a safety perspective it makes it even more important to make sure that there's investment in transport in the area as well. I'm just trying to unpick how that works from your perspective in terms of lobbying. Is that something that you would ask directly to government in terms of investment in transport infrastructure, whether it's for Elizabeth Line investment or the WLO, or is that something that you work with TfL on and then they would submit their ask based on what you've said?
Yes, indeed. I mean, there's an awful lot of work going on between the Mayor's Office, Transport for London, ourselves, DFT, to address the concerns around congestion with the pause on the Elizabeth Line. That is effectively being led by TfL and the Elizabeth Line team. And clearly the Mayor's made it very plain that he wants to see additional Elizabeth Line trains available in order to minimise the impact of congestion. My understanding is that those discussions with government are ongoing. I'm not sure that they've been concluded yet, but as I think many Assembly members will be aware, I think there is a window of opportunity to increase the order for Elizabeth Line trains, which closes relatively soon, so there's some urgency to that. The other question, of course, that relates very directly to capacity at Old Oak Common is exactly what service is going to be run, which will be contingent on the availability of Elizabeth Line trains and any other sort of intermodal shifts at Old Oak Common. And I don't think those decisions have been finalised. We know, of course, that Old Oak Common, while it remains a terminus, is not going to be able to operate up to 18, 24 trains an hour, which was obviously the original vision for High Speed 2. Whether that changes over time as hopefully the Euston link gets delivered, and possibly there could still be some solutions to services further north, that remains unclear. Although our understanding at the moment is that high-speed services will operate from Birmingham Curzon Street to Old Oak Common, interspersed with conventional intercity trains that will run from destinations further north than Birmingham. So the likelihood, I think, is that even within the constrained or the readjusted plans as they currently exist, there will be services not just from Birmingham but also from further north in due course.
Okay, but it still doesn't escape the fact about capacity in the area and the area potentially being overwhelmed. Does this mean that the case for bringing the West London orbital forward is stronger?
Yeah, we support. I mean, we support the West London orbital. We're very close to the West London boroughs and the business community that's supporting the WLO. So we're very much part and parcel of that lobbying. We don't think at the moment that the WLO is fundamental to our plans at Old Oak West. It would be a very good thing to have, and as you rightly say, I think it's perhaps got an additional element of advantage now, so long as Old Oak Common does remain a terminus. But as far as our local plan's concerned, the planning inspector was perfectly happy for us to say the West London orbital is not a requirement in order to deliver the 9,000 to 10,000 homes that we've got site allocations for around the HS2 station.
Okay, and are you ensuring that in terms of future-proofing and making sure you're not building over any potential lines or routes, even, I'm talking about Euston link as well, but also the WLO, can you assure us that you'll make sure that it's future-proof and subject to funding that we don't have at the moment, obviously? But
no, we've been very clear in the local plan that we are not making any site allocations that will compromise the route of the West London orbital line. That will be reserved. because we're very keen in due course to see that implemented.
Okay, great. So the draft 24-25 OPDC budget submission highlights an additional £11 million in the budget for, and the phrase used is target operating model. Can you explain how this will be used?
Yeah, it's not an additional 11 million. I think it is our base budget now is 11.8 million. That effectively is a confirmation of the budget guidance figure that the Mayor gave us last year. It's an increase of £1 million on the base budget from the current year. And when we presented our draft budget this time last year, both to the Assembly and to the Mayor, we were very clear that we wanted to, as far as we could, have a 2-year budget strategy that would underpin, as you rightly say, what we call our target operating model. The target operating model is the growth in the internal capacity, skills and expertise within the organisation to move from what has been largely a planning and strategic role that we've occupied in recent years into a delivery capable organisation. And that, I think, reflects the progress that we've made in terms of our negotiations with the government side as principal landowners and potential funders, and also in terms of the progress towards the high-speed 2 station actually being open and operational. So the target operating model is basically what takes us from being a largely strategic and planning authority into one that's capable of demonstrating its ability to deliver a very large, complicated development project.
Okay, and that brings me nicely to my next question, which is what number of home starts do you anticipate in 24-25?
I might just pass that over to Emma, if I may, who's our Director of Planning.
We're expecting to about meet our target of 1,300 units.
Wow.
But obviously that is based on private developers starting on site. So for the other reasons that have been raised around this table, there are challenges in the sector currently, but looking at what we've got in the pipeline, what we know that we have got at advanced pre-app stage and in application, that's what we would expect.
Okay. Great. That sounds much more positive. I think in previous years we've had this sort of question at budget. And can you provide the committee with an update on how and when you'll be using the £104 million that is available for early land acquisition?
Yes, indeed. We've been very busy utilising that budget, £50 million from the Mayor's Land Fund and £54 million that we secured from DLUC during the course of the year. So we've already spent some of that cash this year, and I'm quite confident that by the end of Q4 this year, we are likely to have, if not spent, certainly committed possibly all of that budget. So we've been very busy negotiating with key local landowners to help the Land Assembly for the Old Oak West project. And I don't think there's going to be any issues underspending that capital sum.
Okay, I think maybe it might be worth the committee having a visual of sort of the maps that you suggest of what the OPDC site now is and the land that you own or are looking to acquire.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to supply that.
Always very happy to have a map, so I think that would be help no end. I'm hearing nods and yeses. Okay. Did anybody else have any questions on OPDC? No. In that case, I think that concludes our questions for this morning. So thank you, everyone, for attending our committee this morning, for your excellent answers to our many and varied questions. Let me turn the page in my script before I forget where I am. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion, and delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? I suspected you might. So quick rounding off then. Item 6, can I ask the committee to note the GLA Group quarterly monitoring reports? Can I ask the committee to note the report on payments over £250? Can I ask the committee to note our work programme and meeting dates? And finally, next meeting of the committee will be held tomorrow, the 13th of December 2023 at 10 a.m, not here in the chamber, but next door in committee rooms 2 and 3. I have no urgent business today, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.